Are you trying to make healthy changes in your life but keep falling back into unwanted patterns? Well, it may be that self sabotage is playing a role. So let's talk about that. I'm Dana Lynn, I'm a registered dietitian, and today we're going to talk about what self sabotage is, why we do it, how do we recognize if we're doing it, and most importantly, how do we stop doing it. So, first of all, what is self sabotage? So, it's basically us doing something or not doing something that is blocking our success, it's preventing us from reaching our goals. And this is something that we all do, and to others it might look deliberate, but it's usually very unconscious. It's not something we have any idea that we're doing. And it's a hard thing to admit that we're doing, but it's a really important part of this process. So that's what we'll get into today. And when it comes to our health, this might look like we're trying to make healthy eating changes or exercise more or get more sleep, but we just keep falling back into those old patterns, right? Is it because we're weak? Is it because there's something fundamentally wrong with us? No, it's much deeper than that. So then why do we do it? Why do we sabotage ourselves? So, first, we have to kind of talk about our ego. And I don't mean ego in the way of, oh, I think I'm better than anyone else, or someone who's just kind of stuck up. I'm talking about ego, our ego, which is a unconscious part of us that its whole job is to keep us safe. So it's very driven by fear and it likes to keep us in a very safe place, right? So it likes predictability. Anything that's out of the norm, it sends up like, red flags. So, say we're trying to do something differently to improve our lives, our ego actually sees this as a threat. And so that's why it brings us back into those old patterns, because those old patterns are predictable, it's reducing our anxiety, it's helping keep our nervous system nice and calm. So, it's really just helping us stay safe, right? And this shows up as us sabotaging ourselves unconsciously because all this happens subconsciously. And some people even like to look at it as a form of self love, right? Because really, this is coming from love. Our ego is not this bad thing, it's trying to protect us and it serves us really well in a lot of ways, but it also really holds us back in a lot of ways. So, how do we recognize if this is happening? What does this look like since it's all subconscious, unconscious things? So, some obvious answers are going to be things like maybe you've worked out all week and then you eat a whole thing of Oreos. Or it might show up as perfectionism, as someone who, sees that they have to work out every single day, or if they fail, they've completely failed and they stop altogether. Or eat really healthy every day, and if they eat one thing wrong, it just throws the whole thing off, right? So that perfectionism piece shows up. Procrastination is another really common one where we have these plans, but like, oh, I'm going to wait till after all the vacations, or work is too crazy right now. And all of these things feel really real. Our priorities get, mixed up. Those things feel important, but it might be that it's actually a form of self-sabotage. Comfort eating can be another form of self-sabotage sometimes when we're trying to like run away from uncomfortable feelings. Then there's some not so obvious ways that we're self sabotaging, which might be in the form of blaming others. So if like your spouse keeps bringing unhealthy food into the house, it becomes a like, oh, it's their fault. Or, um, your kids are home from school for the summer and so there's no time to exercise. Some of these are definitely things that I experience too, right? Or what I hear a lot at work are things that it's like, um, I'm trying to cook healthy for myself, and no one else in the family wants to eat that way. So these are just all things to kind of be looking out for. Some other things are setting our goals too high. So this is one that's so common. Say you never do any meal planning, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, I'm gonna meal plan every single meal this week, and I'm gonna prep them all on Sunday and have all my little meals set in their little containers like we all see on in like social media. I don't know if any of you've ever tried this, but it is so much work. And so to go from no meal planning to like overdoing it so extreme, it can be a form of self-sabotage. Same thing if we don't exercise at all and then we're trying to go to the gym for an hour and a half, 5 days a week. It's too much. And again, like none of this is coming from a place of judgment because we all do it. It's just important to, as I'm going through these, if you recognize any of them, just start to notice that. Another really interesting one I see is resistance to change. And this one drives me nuts, but I try to be open-minded about it. Is those people who are just like, well, I don't like vegetables. I don't like water. And it happens all the time, and I hear it a lot, and like I totally get it, because if that's not something that you like of course it's easy for us to think we're never going to like it, but that's where we have to kind of step into that, like, is this a form of self-sabotage? Because we're adults, we could all figure out how to like something or not like something or whatever. um, or just like doing busy work, like listening to a lot of nutrition podcasts and like rearranging the cupboards and doing things to help prepare us. But which all those are very important. But if that preparation is ongoing and it's replacing actually doing the things, that's where it can become a form of self sabotage. All well meaning. It's just that we're not actually going into the things that are gonna to help. So how are these behaviors keeping us safe? Well, there's a lot of things that could be going on, and it's a little different for everyone, but some of it, one of the most common ones I think is, if you do actually start making these changes and it doesn't work, like, then what? That there's a lot of fear there. Or maybe there's that thought of like, if I start being healthy, like I'll never be able to eat my favorite foods again. I'll never be able to have dessert again, which is totally not true. But that's kind of what diet culture tells us. Or there's the honest look at that relationships might have to change, in some senses. So I want to do a whole video on this, but there's a lot of research around like the people we hang out with the most, we take on their behaviors, right? So if you spend the most time with people who also have unhealthy behaviors and you're trying to change that, a form of self-sabotage is to hold us back because our ego doesn't want to jeopardize those friendships, which is totally legitimate, but it's also something that we need to look at, and you have to kind of weigh the pros and the cons. There's a couple hard ones that I think I just want to mention because I do see it. And one of them relates to weight-related prejudices. So if we do live in a society, unfortunately, where there are some people who are stigmatized for their weight. And so what happens is, if that is used as a reason for not having a good relationship or not having a job, or not having the things that you want, where it becomes like it's because of my weight. If you go through the process of losing that weight and still the relationship or the job doesn't come, that's where it's like it's like, oh my god, it's me. And like, that's so scary. So a lot of people keep weight on for that reason. Or another really hard one is if there's a history of like sexual or physical abuse, that weight becomes a protective layer. And so if you're trying to remove that protection, the ego is like, danger, danger, and so it's going to help do whatever it can to keep that weight on. So there's just a lot of different layers to it and a lot of things to look at, but it is so important to start paying attention to these things and to remember that self-sabotage is not a bad thing. It's just a thing that happens, and we need to start looking at it if we really are trying to break through certain barriers, right? So that's where we get into like, how do we stop this? It's not something to be ashamed of. We all do it in some, way or another. And I think if you're finding yourself not wanting to look at it, a lot of times it's because we somehow have this feeling of like, it makes us weak or less than if we're not perfect in some way, or if we have these like issues coming up, that somewhere along the lines we learned we shouldn't have them, but it's not true. And honestly, I think one of the most brave things we can do is start to look at these things, right? There's actually a quote. I just heard this quote for the first time yesterday, and it was like to me. So I'm going to read it for you guys. The degree to which a person can grow is directly proportional to the amount of truth they can accept about themselves without running away. This is a Leland Valvanderwall quote, and I'm going to read it again because I just want you to really hear it. The degree to which a person can grow is directly proportional to the amount of truth they can accept about themselves without running away. Because we do run away. We don't like hard emotions, we don't like hard conversations, like we're really good at running away, right? But if self sabotage is keeping us from living our dreams, we do have to start looking at these things. Um, so how do we go about doing that? I think the first thing is to really like start to be curious and identify certain patterns that keep showing up. If you're trying to make a change in one area, you keep kind of falling back, really like let's look at that. Where is this coming from? What is the purpose of falling back into these behaviors? And this is where you want to take a good hard look and really be honest, maybe journal on it, talk it out with someone, meditate on it, whatever that looks like for you. Um, but you want to address that underlying fear and really sit with it, right? And then give it love because it is there for a purpose. It has its purpose, it's not a negative thing. Um, and then once you've kind of done some of that work, now it's time to create a plan. How are you going to move forward? And maybe you don't even need to like dig up all the old reasons behind it to move a plan. Sometimes it's just having that awareness of, oh, I'm self sabotaging. And that's enough to help push you through. It's not easy. You want to have a lot of self compassion as you're going through this because it can bring up a lot of stuff. But man, it can be life changing, that's for sure. Um, and I wouldn't be saying this if I haven't done a lot of this work myself. It is hard, but it's so important. So I hope that this is helpful. Um, if you are thinking like a note of maybe recognizing some self-sabotaging patterns, go ahead and leave a comment below or just, what your thoughts are on this, and definitely share this if you feel like it could help someone else. Like it, that way it's going to reach more people, and of course subscribe if you want more stuff like this. I hope that it was helpful, and I hope that you can be compassionate with yourself as you kind of make these self discoveries, because there's a lot of good on the other end. All right, thanks guys, bye.